ready, you can start because it's 1
Okay.
o'clock.
Okay.
Kathleen, just so you know, it's being live streamed on Facebook Live. Is that right, Carol?
Oh, okay.
So,
Yes.
yeah, if you prefer that, you could view it from
Yeah,
there.
and we
You're
are
welcome to
there.
speak here.
I'm fussing with how high to make this computer and, you know.
Yeah, I
Okay,
know that you're kind of like a Punch and Judy show. You're up and you're down and you're up and you're down. Does anybody know who Punch and Judy is? Is that date?
Yes, yes.
It
I have
does date
a
me.
couple of different laptops and they're all different.
yeah.
So anyway,
Okay. All right, so as people come, I will just admit them. So, and there's somebody there.
Okay.
So you're ready to go whenever.
I am. I'm gonna like count to 10 and then I'm gonna start because when you edit this out, then there's all this lag time. So I'm gonna wait 10 seconds. Then I'm gonna start.
Well, it says it's live streaming, but I don't see us. Why is that?
It says recording live Facebook on my.
Yeah, it says it. I'm on the, let me just go back and come back on the page. Well, we'll do what we can do. I'll keep looking. Because usually it just shows up.
Okay.
I don't see it.
Okay, everybody. I'm Claire Johnson. Hey, Lori. Nice to see you. I'm Claire Johnson, president of MWA NorCal. And first of all, I want to thank Glenda for, as usual, holding my hand during anything that has to do with tech, which I am a total Luddite. Admit that. So we're here today with Mysti Berry on improving your dialogue. Mysti Berry earned a BA in linguistics from UC Santa Cruz and half an MFA from UCLA. She has had short stories published in multiple anthologies, including EQ, Ellery Queen, something MM magazine, I assume, and American, what's AHMM?
Oh, Alfred Hitchcock Mystery.
Alfred Hitchcock, of course, duh. And published 3 volumes of a charity anthology that raises money for voting rights. She's working on a novel set in 1938 Hilo, Hawaii, a time, a place of many different languages and voices, and right before Pearl Harbor, I assume. So I want to note that the anthology Mysti edited, the 3rd volume of Low Down Dirty Vote, has been nominated for a 2003 Anthony Award. And I think that's really awesome. Oh, yes, Lori King. So the definition of dialogue: conversation between 2 or more people as a feature of a book, play, or movie. That's a pretty bare bones definition and says nothing about the power of language to convey love, hate, or fear. And language is ever changing. So language that might have wowed us in the 1940s and might be considered sappy today. So, Mysti, how do we keep our dialogue fresh and the ABCs of creating dialogue that will make us want to read and turn the page? As always, we all want people to turn the page, and getting someone interested in optioning our books because the dialogue is so good. So take it away, Mysti.
All right. Well, by no coincidence at all, I have a whole slide deck on the topic. So let me, not sure what that was. Oh, you have to let me share. Sorry.
I will do that right now.
No worries. Computers are
now you
evil.
should be able to do that.
Super duper. Okay, here we go. I am clicking like a crazy monkey. All righty. So I am going to share with you some of the things I learned from studying linguistics and just a little bit of screenwriting in the middle that can improve our dialogue. And the reason I'm passionate about this topic is because I think there's an idea floating around that, oh, if you're not naturally good at dialogue, you can never get better. And I know for a fact that's not true. So I'm here to share super simple tools that can help you look at your dialogue and make it do what you need it to do. And why should you believe me at all? Like Claire said, I have a BA from UC Santa Cruz. Woohoo! At the time, it was one of the top 5 undergrad programs in linguistics. I have an MFA in writing from University of San Francisco, which is not San Francisco State, different place, but I never let my MFA get in the way of a good story. And I got half an MFA from UCLA, which is where they let us attend the MFA screenwriting classes. We just didn't get to take the production classes. And I have been told by people who aren't my husband that by the final draft, my dialogue doesn't suck. I have helped a few people improve their dialogue, including a USA Today bestseller. So I think you will be able to use these tools. So that's me. And let's define what we mean by great dialogue. And what I mean by great dialogue is it moves the story forward as it reveals character. And at critical points, the dialogue can also reinforce or bubble up the theme or premise, the meaning of the story. And you'll see here Effie and Sam Spade from the movie Maltese Falcon. And the first thing I'll do is share an example of dialogue from the end of the novel Maltese Falcon. Effie says, "You did that to her? Your Sam's a detective. She did kill Miles, Angel, offhand, like that. Please don't touch me." So this is the back and forth between two people who know each other really well. Sam has just sent a woman he loves to jail, and Effie is horrified by that. And nobody says that out loud, but that's what we get from this dialogue. So that's what I mean, great dialogue. We're not telling the reader what to think. We are showing them characters in crisis, and the reader gets to have the fun of figuring out what's going on. Ineffective dialogue doesn't reveal anything new and material to the story about the characters, right? I might find out that the character likes Frosted Flakes, but I don't know that that means anything, for example. And it doesn't help move the story forward. And it has no relevance to the meaning of the story. It's just the writer either trying to use characters to talk directly to the reader or the author expressing themselves, but it doesn't really do anything for the story. And here's an example from a first draft of my own writing where two characters are talking back and forth. "What's going on? Same old issue. Can we talk in your office? Well, you know the way," right? That's not fun to read. It probably wasn't even fun to write. And I made it go away. But that's ineffective dialogue. All righty. So I'll explain why I even bring linguistics into it. We'll go through language, dialect, and idiolect. Only one of those things is super useful, but one of those things is really super useful. Talk briefly about conflict versus exposition. Talk about power in language and the fact that we all lie. And then I'll give you a link to some resources so that you can actually put what we're talking about into practice. Like I said before, some people do have a natural gift for dialogue. They absolutely do. Some of us, like me, had to learn it the hard way. I was lucky, and linguistics and screenwriting sort of melded together in my brain and helped me move along. And so I want to help other people. What linguistics does is by consciously understanding the behavior and function of language, how people actually talk, not how they're supposed to talk, we can manipulate that for our own dramatic goals. All right, so the good news is you already know the rules. By the time you were 4, you knew that the subject comes first, then the verb, then the object, without even thinking about it. You have internalized all the rules of English. The bad news is you don't know what you know, and so it's kind of hard to use. But the great news is you will, by the end of this talk, know a few things that you can manage. And I'll just say at the outset, there's lots of rules made up by people that we in linguistics kind of haughtily called prescriptive grammarians, punctuation and preposition is a terrible thing to end a sentence with, things like that. And we're not going to worry about that. We're just worrying about how people actually talk and how we can use it for our dramatic purposes. These are very fancy. All right, language, dialect, and idiolect. This is the main beef of the talk. So a language is a set of basic syntax rules and essential vocabulary that a group of people share. The thing to know is that languages are often something that political bodies want to weigh in on more than a scientific definition. And by example, I'll use the Scots language. There is a separate language distinct from English called Scots, but there are a lot of people around the world who think, oh, that's ridiculous. It's just a dialect. And that reflects, I think, some of the history of the relationship between England and Scotland, right? But so my recommendation is to ignore language. Similarly, dialect is a group of characteristics that are different from the base language and are typically defined by a region, although sometimes they are also defined by a culture, like surfers from Cornwall to, at least to Kauai, have some of the same dialect characteristics. And the line between language and dialect, when does a dialect become a separate language, again, is often defined by political bodies more than any kind of scientific definition. So I would forget about that, with one exception that we'll talk about a little later. So don't worry too much about language or dialect. They're not that helpful. But idiolect, which is the characteristics unique to a particular person, those are super useful when writing dialogue. So put that word in your brain, idiolect, if you don't have it already. Lots of things can define how a person speaks unique to themselves. Their diction level, whether they're use $10 words or 50-cent words, if they have any quirks of vocabulary, like maybe they always flip revelation and relevation, things like that. Sentence length, phrase complexity, and it's hard to have a complex phrase without also having a long sentence. But I've noticed that a lot of people with a law background can talk in incredibly complex clauses and subclauses, and it's amazing. And I can't. There's also what people talk about and what they choose not to talk about. And that's not so much linguistics as it is just characteristics of that person. But I thought I'd mention it here. There's code switching. And if you've never heard that phrase, it's simply if someone has mastery of two languages, for example, they'll speak in their preferred language, but every once in a while they'll sort of flip out and grab words, phrases, sentences, or maybe switch completely to the other language. And things that can trigger that are things like everyone talks about how much more fun it is to swear in Spanish than English. So if someone was speaking English with someone else and they needed to swear, they might switch to Spanish. Or English has a lot of computer words and tech words. So someone might be speaking Japanese and then switch into English to talk about computers for a minute and then switch back. It's usually unconscious. People are often not aware that they're code switching. So that's code switching. Reduplication, which I've never figured out why this isn't simply duplication, but it's reduplication. English doesn't use this as much as some other languages, but we do use it in two places. For example, imagine there's two teenagers talking about a third teenager, and one says, well, I like him. And the other one says, well, do you like him? That's reduplication. And similarly, the number of, so take the word very, and the more times you add very into a sentence, the more that the thing that very modifies is. So I'm happy, or I'm very happy, or I'm very, 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 very happy. So English doesn't do that too much, but we do it. So you could use that. There's also the idea of mirroring or accommodation. And when two different people speak different dialects or languages, one of them might start to mirror the habits of the other, or idiolect might mirror the habits of the other one in order to be better understood. Again, usually not conscious, but for example, if someone who had a big education and someone who had not so much are trying to talk, and the guy's using a lot of big words, and he realizes the other guy just doesn't understand him, he might switch it down, speak more simply, or try to find a way to get to be understood. And another example is I went to Australia for 9 months, and when I came back, I appeared the sounds of some of my vowels had changed, and some of the word choice had changed, just because I had totally unconsciously been trying to be understood, and so I would adapt to the language around me. And these are all things that you can deliberately put in different characters' dialogue to make them be distinct from each other and to support the goals of your story. There's two more things I want to add while we're here, which is dialects carry a lot of cultural meaning and people have lots of feelings about them. So be very careful. One thing you can do is look for the markers of that dialect. Those are a few words or a few pronunciation differences that clearly mark that as that dialect. For example, speakers of Scottish English may say we, like W-E-E for small, or they might say can for no. And you can just sprinkle that stuff very sparingly throughout the dialogue of the person to make them distinct. I would never do this with a dialect I didn't know really well myself, or didn't have friends who could check my work to make sure that friends, speakers of that dialect, to make it work. Because it's really easy to get it wrong, and it's pretty insulting when you do. So it's probably you all already know that. So I have one expert tip, which is once you have set the idiolect of a person, like I'm going to pick someone who is always trying to sound smarter than he is, and he always talks about money, and so you set that up, and then at a crisis point, or when something happens in the story that's very important, you can start to vary that habitual speech. So we realize there's some pressure being put on this person, or whatever you want to do. So it's really fun to play with these elements, and I'm sure there are more, but these are the ones that stuck out to me when I was studying linguistics and as I've been writing. So here's an example from Strangers on a Train by Patricia Highsmith. It's from the novel. It's probably also in the movie, I'm not sure, but it's from the novel. And it's Bruno and Guy on the train at the beginning. Shall I tell you one of the ideas for murdering my father? No. Which do you want, the busted light socket in the bathroom or the carbon monoxide garage? Do it and stop talking about it. I don't know if people can access they can't access the chat from Facebook Live. Is that right?
No.
No. Okay.
Not the chat. No,
Okay.
they can, hold on one second. Yeah, they can do the chat just on Zoom. There is a comment section on Facebook Live. If they're watching it there, they could be on two different things. So,
okay.
yeah.
I'm not there. So, but maybe if people who are listening on Zoom wanted to put in the chat, what are the differences that you notice between Bruno and Guy's language? You can just put a few brief word or two in the chat if you want. And I'll wait a second, and then if nothing shows up, I'll tell you what I think. And Claire, yeah, I have to check myself every time I want to use either one of those words. Okay, I'm not sure anyone can get through, so I'll just tell you what I think. I noticed right away that Bruno talks in much longer sentences, and Guy is really short and abrupt and negative. And of course, what they're talking about is very distinct. So that's just two things that I see right off the bat. All right. So that's idiolect. That's where a lot of the power comes from, and being able to make your characters sound distinct and to help hook the dialogue into the forward momentum of the story. Oops, pressing the wrong thing. Uh-oh, hang on. There we go. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is conflict versus exposition. And this is as much screenwriting as it is linguistics. The one thing I learned in linguistics is that literally, this was true in the late 80s, literally half of what people said based on studies was just verifying that what we just heard was what we just heard. Tag questions like, she's tough, isn't she? Or repetition, where I say, I ate the whole burrito, and you say, you ate the whole thing? You know I ate the whole thing, I just told you, but you're repeating what I said. And in real life, of course, a lot of boring stuff happens, and we have to talk about it. Pass the ketchup, hello, is this Wells Fargo? The idea here is that great dialogue isn't the same as 100% authentic human speech. If you wrote 100% authentic human speech, half of what you wrote, you'd want to throw out. It's unnecessary. So, and I'm sure everybody already knows this, but leave out the boring stuff, even if it's real. That thing about half of what we say is just verifying that what we just heard is correct just blew me away when I learned it. So what you can do instead is use a technique from screenwriting or playwriting, which is, I say every conversation, but it's really as many conversations as you can. Structure them around a conflict. A wants something and B wants the opposite. and then treat that conversation like a sword fight. A goes after what she wants, and B says, oh, no, you don't. Here's a thing in your way. And A says, oh, but then I'll try this. And you go back and forth until some resolution is met. It's kind of the same as scene structure, right? And as often as you can, leave out everything but the conflict that reveals character. And you can hide exposition in conflict. What do I mean by that? I have an example. All right, so this is, the exposition is right in the dialogue. I came to New York to be an actress, but now all my money is gone. Sucks to be you. Now we do see two different people here, right? Someone in distress, someone with a broken heart, and somebody who's very callous. But there's no story element, right? We don't really know what's going on here. Nobody's asking for anything or being denied it. And if we just tweak it, the actress says, spare change. And we may not know she's an actress yet, but she says, spare change. And the guy says, I seen you on TV last night. You must be rich. It's like, no, I'm not going to give you my spare change. You're rich. And so that's an example of structuring basically the same conversation around conflict. All right. This talk is going much faster, so I'll try to slow down my talking. Now we're going to talk about power in language and how we're all liars. I see something in the chat. Let me see what's going on there. Oh, yes. Guy's dialogue is short and to the point, and Bruno's is flowery. Yeah, exactly right. Okay. So things we know about language and power. We used to think these language differences were just about gender. And there were books written about it in the 90s and blah, blah, blah. But it turns out on further study, it was really about the difference in power between two speakers, and that would influence how they spoke. And what I understand to be true these days is that the more powerful you are, the less you say, everything else being equal. But also the more power you have, the more you feel free to interrupt other people. And the less powerful you feel in a conversation, the more likely you are to use tag questions, verifiers like, oh, she's beautiful, isn't she? Or softeners. I might have said something different, the ways to not sound so definitive or assertive. And you're otherwise demonstrating that you want to collaborate with a more powerful person, not dominate them. And these are also useful things you can, when you're looking at a scene, who has the power, bring their conversation in late or make the other person explain more. And I have an example of that from the novel. Oops. I always have to click the right thing. From the novel. Oh, not yet. Okay. So examples of playing with power are someone thinks they have more power than they actually do. So they talk like a powerful person, but the reactions they get in dialogue aren't as expected. And that can be funny or tragic or whatever you need. Or someone pretends to have less power than they really do. And I think TV's Columbo is the master of the pretending to have very little power until the very last moment. And often towards the end of a story, a formerly powerless person might find their source of power, and then their language changes and other people start treating them differently. And that's always a fun, powerful moment if you can find it. Oops. It looks like I lost an example. I'm sorry. Oh, there it is. Elmer Gantry, the novel. There's two people speaking. The second guy is Elmer Gantry, and the first guy is someone on the crew. And the first guy says, say, Hellcat, you had not to run for president again. Nobody's ever president twice. Somebody's going to be. Gee, Elmer, don't run for it. And he goes on. And then Elmer Gantry just says back, let me catch him at it. So I think it's clear here that Elmer Gantry is the one with power and a considerable more amount of power than the person who's speaking to him, sort of begging him not to do what he's about to do. So I apologize, I skipped over that too quickly. All righty. So that was power. Oh, let me see. There's another chat. So Claire asks, regarding gender, do you think these power techniques are as effective for men versus women, i.e. that women need to be more assertive to achieve the same result? That is beyond my area of expertise. That's more behavioral psychology than language. But I will say that we do observe in, like, when people are given their promotion evaluations and stuff, that people who say roughly the same thing, if they're women, they can sometimes be categorized as aggressive, while the men are praised for being assertive. We know some of that exists in this culture. So you can make the choice of having the woman speaking as assertively as a man, and then she gets some reactions that aren't great, or maybe she gets reactions that are. I think younger people, certainly people younger than me, are better about these issues than my generation. But it is always a double-edged sword for a woman to speak as or more assertively than the typical man in my culture. I hope that made sense. All right. Whenever I say everybody lies, there's always someone who says, well, I don't lie. You do, but you probably do for very good reasons, right? So we lie to get something we couldn't get. I mean, the bad reason is to trick someone into giving us something they wouldn't give to us if we didn't lie. But there are good reasons for lying as well: to protect yourself, to avoid feeling vulnerable. Like someone might ask, well, how much money does your dad make? And you might lie because you don't want to feel vulnerable for the answer to that. And there's social norms, right? Many parents lie to their kids about Santa Claus for a few years, or the tooth fairy. We may feel pride or fear or shame around the answer, and so we dance around it or little white lie it. And sometimes we're literally consciously trying to protect ourselves or other people, or we don't trust the person we're speaking with, so we just tell them whatever we need to move on. And like with everything else in this webinar, I would say go ahead and write it on the nose in the first draft, and don't worry about this till the second draft or later. I can never write a story and good dialogue at the same time. I just can't. Maybe other people can. But these are definitely things to think about as you're tuning up your second draft. Oops. Okay. Wow. It took like half as long as it did when I practiced it. But some resources for you. You can go to mystiberry.com/resources. I'm not selling anything, but there's a PDF that has links to more about sociolinguistics, some writers I've read recently that use their dialogue very effectively, and there's something else in there, I forget what. And there's also a how to assess your own dialogues. Like, say you finish your first draft, you're like, I wonder if this is as good as it could be. There's a technique I share where you take all of the things that one character says and you paste them into a column. You don't use any of the tags or any of the surrounding context. You just paste the literal dialogue in, and you make another column for, I usually do my main character and my antagonist and maybe one or two others, because it's kind of tedious to do it. But then when you look at them side by side, you're like, oh, are these people really speaking differently? And you can then assess whether you need to like think about idiolects and giving the people different characteristics. Because I will say, when I do judging for short story and to a lesser extent for novel, what I most often see is undifferentiated dialogue. Like it all could be said by the same person. And so tackling that is a great first step. Glenda, there are, and I put them in that list, but I enjoy how Dashiell Hammett uses dialogue, but that's 100 years old now, right? I read a book recently by Rob Oster, I think is his name, called The Devil's Chew Toy, and he's sort of inventing a new kind of cozy called a queersy. But all the characters in that book were familiar to me from growing up in the Bay Area, but were very distinct from each other. And it was really fun to hear voices in my head, especially after 2 years of pandemic, to hear all of these voices back. So Rob Oster was fun. Katrina McPherson's Scott series, her humor series, has dialogue that's really fun to read. Her sense of timing and humor is great in that. And then for a third kind of good, Kelly Garrett, and these are all in that resources thing. Kelly Garrett wrote a book called Like a Sister, and she manages a couple different cultures in the same book just seamlessly. And she was writing about a culture that's not familiar to me, Black Americans in New York City in the rap scene. And within like 10 pages, I just felt like I understood everyone and I understood what was going on and what things meant. And it was just lovely. And I'm not even sure how she did it. So I'm going to have to go back and study that book. But those are just 3 examples of, I'm trying to be a little more current than a 100-year-old writer like Dashiell Hammett. People praise Chandler as well for his dialogue, but I haven't studied it. All righty. And if you have follow-up questions, anyone who sees this can email me at mystiberry@gmail.com. And you can go to mystiberry.com resources. Hopefully you've had time to write that down.
Well, I think we have time. I mean, if people want to unmute themselves,
Absolutely.
why people ask questions.
Kathleen, I love your suggestion that people take improv classes to sharpen the conflict thinking, and also just to play with being different characters, right? I think that's a brilliant idea. I took one improv class and I had such stage fright, I couldn't do it again.
You got to speak, not block.
That's right.
Fight. Take it to the new level. I also, to study dialogue, sometimes what I've done is take on scripts.com the old scripts from movies and just read through them to see how they do some of this, because for me, it's been very hard to achieve. I tend to fall back on exposition to help me, but that's not really what I should do. I should be writing the dialogue, and the dialogue ought to be able to stand on its own and tell the story. So,
yeah, and I will say that screwball comedies and film noir often have surprisingly modern sounding dialogue, especially the immediate post-war film noir and screwball comedies from the 30s. That's always fun.
MASH is also good. Reruns of MASH.
Oh,
yeah. Really? Huh.
I mean, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Lori asks a great question. What about writing dialogue in historical stories? How to keep it in the flavor but understandable? That is a great question. And linguistics doesn't help us too much with that answer. But I will say for me, the trick is to, again, look for markers that I can sprinkle throughout and to avoid anachronisms. So there's a part of probably, I don't know, 50 to 80% of our language is the same as it was 100 years ago, but a bunch of it is different. So, and I did learn one thing. I wrote this novel, which was about a 14-year-old girl in 12th century Mongolia. And by and large, people bought it. But I used this one word, sun fishing, which is what a horse does when it kicks up its back legs and twists sideways. And I used that word because I'm like, oh, it's a horse culture, so using a horse term would be good, right? Everyone who read it said, oh, that word sun fishing, that doesn't sound Mongolian. And I'm like, the whole thing is in English. What are you saying? So the lesson I learned was really distinctive words, really uncommon words will pop up and stick out. But Lori, you probably know more than me about how to solve the historical language problem. So I will just read your book and figure it out, because I'm writing my very first historical and I'm terrified. There's 5 different languages. It's at a time that, and in a place that's not that well known. So convincing people that what is true is really true, and avoiding anachronisms myself is scary and hard. But we'll get there.
Yeah, Lori.
Oh, letters.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry.
No,
Lori King says that she reads a lot, said at that time, but also reading letters from that time. People write personal letters a little closer to their natural language than books, which can be very formal and very stuffy. So yeah, I grabbed a bunch of letters set in the West in the 19th century when I was writing a screenplay set there. And I interrupted someone, so I'll shut up now.
Yeah, don't you think it's a delicate balance between vernacular and, as you say, having a word that makes sense, but something that will throw the reader out of the story unintentionally. I mean, I'm writing a book set in 1930 San Francisco, and the wonderful thing about the 20s and the 30s was the explosion of slang. And some of the slang I can't use because it has no relevance today. So, I think you have to, especially in a historical book, you have to kind of pick and choose which things survived or which things people can infer from just the dialogue. If you call a woman a tomato, okay, we can get what he means. I mean, of course, it's grossly offensive, but you can gather that. I mean, we don't call women tomatoes anymore, but you can gather what it means. But if you used another term that was more obscure or just died out, then you're kind of throwing the reader out unintentionally. I mean, that's what I've found, going through and trying to keep the dialogue snappy, because a lot of these words are really short and to the point, almost like swear words. They have a lot of K sounds, and they have a lot of, they're fun. The language is fun, but it doesn't really matter if it's fun to you if the reader doesn't understand how fun it is. You're sort of chuckling, and you're chuckling to yourself,
Right. And slang can age out so quickly.
Yeah.
There's this expression, my Roscoe's yammered ka-chow, ka-chow. And that was written like right after Roscoe's was used as a euphemism for guns. Right. So that stuff all got so stereotypical so fast. So yeah, it is.
It's a dance. It's a dance.
Absolutely. And having other people, I think, read your drafts is really important. I don't know. I may have my novelist's head handed to me on a plate. We'll find out.
Well,
but it was fun.
I did want to ask you about tags. I mean, how do you, if you have your dialogue be between two characters, I mean, let's not even add 2 or 3 or 4. I mean, there's some people who can handle that beautifully, but it's not me. And yet, you don't want to put the tag in there, but it's, at what point do you actually need a tag? I mean, and it's also problematic because as the author, you know exactly who's speaking, but as a reader, the tags kind of stop. He said, he asked, they kind of stop the dialogue, and yet they're also necessary. You know what I'm getting at? It's hard.
Yeah, and it plagues me to this day because we don't use tags in screenwriting, which is where I started writing untrue things. So yeah, whenever people get confused, that's where you should have a tag. And I try not to use them until that point. But I also tend not to write really long dialogue scenes in my fiction. So there'll be a back and forth a couple times, and then I'll often break it up with action anyway. So then you need to use a tag just to let the reader know who is speaking after a break. So I think really long exchanges of dialogue are problematic, and sometimes the book needs them, right? Sometimes 2 characters need to have a conversation, and we need to see that conversation. But I don't have any hard and fast rules, like do it every 4th one or whatever.
I'm sure AI has rules for
that. AI cannot do subtext. I tried to make ChatGPT write subtext and it couldn't do it. So
well, that is heartening.
So we'll still have jobs. Jobs.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Have you found that your writing dialogue has changed? I mean, more a reflection of the time, not your skill level, that it's that language has changed over the course of, let's say, just say 20 years, that have our attention spans got shorter, so therefore our sentences are shorter, or I mean, the whole issue of evolving language. I mean,
language is a living thing. It changes every day. And when enough people, like there was a period of time, a couple of years just before the pandemic, I think, when because had become a preposition, people were suddenly saying because welfare inequity, or because dogs and cats. They were literally using it like a preposition.
Right.
But then that went away again and people stopped doing it. So language goes forward and back. I can't really address the attention span thing because I have the attention span of a goldfish. But that's probably part of why I don't write super long dialogue or super long anything. I break it up, but that's the screenwriter in me. In fact, usually when people read my work for the first time, if they're like an experienced agent or editor, they're like, yeah, I could tell you came from screenplays. It's not really a compliment, but.
Well, I mean, there's some books that I feel are written actually for the screen, but they appear as novels. That in terms of the action and the dialogue.
Like, what's an example?
Well, actually, the last Harry Potter book, I think that book was written for the screen. Just because of the way the action presented itself, and the I mean, I could go on this for hours, but basically, as a series, it trashed a lot of the things that Rowling had established in earlier books, because visually it would have made much more sense to see Molly killing Bellatrix, but because it's for a screen thing. But if you obviously, if you're a Harry Potter fanatic like I am, you use a killing curse, then that's a huge no-no. At least it was in the previous 6 books. But
you have gone very deep.
I have gone very deep
Potter
into this. Sadly, it's a fatal flaw. But I think a lot of books have been written for the screen in mind, which might make I'm not saying this as a critic. Well, I am criticizing J.K. Rowling, but I'm not necessarily saying this as a criticism, just because a fast moving dialogue with fast action will move the book forward. You can't help but turn that page, because if you are visualizing it, then it's I think it changes how you write. It's going to be fast, it's going to be quick, it's going to be snappy, because you have that action always in the back of your head, and the dialogue has to support the action. I mean, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's such the opposite of delightful traditions like Southern Gothic, where you just fall into that language and get lost in it. So I have no idea what's marketable or what's not. I'm writing right now. I'm not even thinking about the market, but yeah, I think there's still room for everything.
Yeah, hopefully. Knock on wood. Are we knocking? like a crazy woman. Does anyone else want to chime in, since I'm monopolizing this?
Oh, Misty, I had a question. It's Kathleen, about when you write the screenplays. I realize we don't use tags. But one of the things that struck me is I got copies of the nominees for the Academy Award top position. And when I went through and I read the scripts, I was really shocked at like the number 1, which was Everything, Anywhere, All the Time, I believe. There's few words. I mean, there's literally the action, the ratio of action to words is probably 10-1. And I think, we probably need to write more action. Of course, that's always good. But I kind of wondered, why are they moving so much away from words? And I noticed it also with the music that they're using on movies too. Is it almost drowns out the dialogue. So I began to think maybe it has something to do with the fact that if you are clever in your camera angles and you use your faces and your twitches and all these things that people do, you probably don't need as much dialogue as we write in novels. I don't know. I'm just curious.
I don't know. I've never compared the amount of dialogue. I will say that Everything, Everywhere, All at Once is quite an unusual movie. But I think you're right. There's right now, especially with the whole Marvel universe and all that stuff, there's a lot of the big money movies, which Everything Everywhere All at Once was not, but the big money movies are about the explosions and the chases and all of that. I think it's just depends on what kind of movie, what kind of story you're telling. And And also just remember that if a movie is made for movies that have ambitions to be sold outside the American market, because there's so many languages that are involved and they'll only be translated into 2 or 3, they deliberately minimize the language.
Good point. Good point.
Some of them, but yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, what was the movie, Run Lola Run? I think there's no dialogue in that for the first 10 minutes or something.
Ooh.
And that was a German American co-production, I think.
mhm.
So yeah, there's a lot of factors there, but I think your observation is very spot on.
Yeah.
Well, my sister-in-law is fluent in Mandarin, and we were watching Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon together, and I noticed their mouths were moving, but the dialogue was like yes, no, and yet their mouths were moving. And I asked her about the translation, and she said the translation was horrible. That, you know, but that worked for the American market.
So it was
That's-
subtitled in.
It was subtitled in English, and it was, you know, originally
That was an English language movie, wasn't it?
It was originally a Chinese movie.
Oh, okay.
Or you know, it was just, she said that it was not that the translation was absolutely horrible what they were saying. So
Yeah, it can
so I found that interesting. I did want to mention that Rob Osler, which is the author of The Devil's Chew Toy, has for some strange reason joined MWA NorCal recently. And yeah, and he is also nominated for Best First Anthony. So
Yes, I was on a
yeah.
panel with him before that started.
oh, he's
and
hilarious. He is hilarious. He
Very
is
funny
so
man.
funny. I you know, I can't wait to read his book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
he's-
wish I could write humor the way he does. I
Oh
really
yeah. Yeah, he just literally is so funny. Worth anybody who is going to BoucherCon, really worth check out a panel where he's on it, because he's a stitch. I mean, do you wonder where that came from, Misty? A stitch. He's a stitch. Where did that come from? Do you think about these weird, you know?
I don't have that in my vocabulary, so I don't have
No,
that.
he's a stitch. Oh, am I like dating myself? Although you and I are probably close to the same age. But anyway.
Well, anyone who has kids probably has a lot more fresher slang than I do.
Well, you know, I
Lot more
grew up,
fresh.
my parents were expats. And so, you know, I have a lot of expressions that my children actually call me to task, because they use them on their contemporaries. And they're like, where the hell did you hear that? That's not American. And of course it isn't. It's either Irish or Scottish. So anyway,
Yeah.
language is a fascinating thing.
I love language. I love it so
I
much.
know. So do we have anything else in the chat?
Oh, there is something.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh yeah, Glenda was talking about the superhero movies, Guardians of the Galaxy. Not much dialogue, and what was there was pretty predictable. I kept saying the expected next line out loud. Oh. And no one, it didn't annoy anyone else. Oh, you probably
I annoyed my son. I was there with my whole family, and I had my one son on one side, he's in his 30s, and my grandson on the other side. And I think they would have liked to put a bag over my head, you know? It's like, okay, we got to leave her home the next time.
But yeah, they don't always spend a lot of money on the script. It's true.
Okay. So do we have anything else? Shall we wrap this up?
No, I don't see anything in the chat.
Okay.
I don't see any comments on the Facebook page, but we're definitely on the Facebook page, which is great. Yeah.
So I do want to remind everybody that this will appear on our YouTube channel. And of course, you can always rewatch it on Facebook, although Misty won't, but you can watch it on the Facebook site as well. But we will put it up on YouTube so people can revisit it, because I think there's just a lot of great information here. And now I have to go back and cut out half my dialogue. So anyway. So I really want to thank you, Misty. This is really a great presentation. And like I said, a lot of food for thought. I mean, we kind of, you know, as writers, we kind of toss around words, but, you know, they're sort of beyond logic. But there's a way to make it work, and you don't have to be Dashiell Hammett or Raymond Chandler. So I do want to thank you very much.
And yeah, it's just really hard to talk about language, right? Because we're using words to talk about words.
Words, right.
And it can get kind of thick. but yeah, and I'm always happy to talk to anyone. This is one of my passions. So
Great. Well, I do want to thank you again and have fun in New York.
okay,
Thank you. Thank
guys.
you for attending, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.